And we don't have to have this suffering that could come if we continue in this process with the destruction of currency. The easiest place to cut back is overseas, and we can do that by starting to bring our troops home. Unfortunately, today, there's not a serious intent to bring troops home. Matter of fact, all the other candidates are talking about how long they're going to stay. You know, Senator McCain came up with the idea, if we have to stay 100 years, we should stay. And, the other threat is the war is likely to spread. We are involved behind the scenes trying to pick the next dictator of Pakistan. We're working very hard, once again, trying to overthrow the government of Iran. We've been doing that since the 50s, since we put in the Shah, threw out an elected leader. So it's on, and then they ask questions why they might get annoyed with us. Well, can you imagine what we would do as a people if somebody did to us what we do to others? We would be annoyed, and we would be unified, and we'd stand up against those that we saw as intruders and occupiers. And we just have to see that. But all these things come to an end because eventually countries can't afford it anymore. And that is what the story is about, the weakening of the dollar. But if we change our way and change our tactics and come home, we could restore some confidence. We don't have to wait till the destruction of the dollar and the poor can become poorer, and the elderly who are dependent on their Social Security check won't even be able to live. Today, the cost of living is going up 10 to 15%, and Social Security recipients get a 2% raise. And this is why people are feeling so miserable and unhappy about it. And yet, what are the proposals in Washington right now? There are two things. The government should spend more money, and they should print more money. And that's where the problem is. We need to cut less. We need to cut taxes significantly and cut the spending. But I think absolutely the easiest place is to cut this on our overseas expenditure in the empire. We spend nearly $1 trillion a year on overseas expenditures, and we can cut a lot of money out of that, and this could restore confidence. Well, we get in this trouble because we've done what other countries have done so long. Because there's a limit to how much we can tax, a limit to how much we can borrow, and then we have resorted to what other countries have done. They inflate. Inflate means to increase the supply of money. And today, it used to be you had to have printing presses. Today, all we have to have is computers. They can create $10 billion in one day with a computer. And only common sense tells you that means the value of the dollar is going to go down. The founders of this country knew this. They were explicit on it, and they said, no printing money, only gold and silver is legal tender, and they also said no central bank, which means no federal The conditions we have today, the conditions of perpetual war, staying for 100 years in Iraq, as well as having perpetual war against terrorism, which happens to be a tactic. I mean, it isn't a country or any one group. And the mentality now of the country is the war is perpetual, so we're expected to assume that our freedoms are going to be undermined perpetually. And that is where the problem is. Freedoms seem to be always undermined in times of war. War has been said is the health of the state. World War I, World War II, Korea War. Freedoms have been undermined, but they tended to come back to a degree. But now we say, well, this is going to last forever. So now when they undermine our right of privacy and propose national ID cards and when they talk about the loss of habeas corpus, this is a bad trend. This is why we as a people have to stand up and say we've had enough and we want our freedom back. To restrain the government, to release the creative energy and free people in this country. It is also protected by a concept of sovereignty. I still believe in the sovereignty of the United States. Which means we should not be beholden to the United Nations, the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO, NAFTA. No! Union. Yeah! you know what? Maybe we ought to protect our borders. Border guards in Iraq and National Guard units, which should be here for natural disaster problems as well as invasions of illegals. Where are our guard units? They're being run down and worn out and sent overseas. They ought to be here to take care of the problem. The promise of amnesty and the promise of benefits to any who come here illegally is an incentive for them to come. And this has to change. And we have this can be restored by just following the rules, the law of the land. And so many people have been taught for so many decades now that the Constitution is a relative document. It should be fluctuating and adapted to current times. We need to change the Constitution. We can. It should be done slowly and deliberately. But what has happened by both parties and by the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch is we have ignored the Constitution, and now there is not much left to it. And that is
we need an honest Texan in the White House.
We know that the enthusiasm is building. And tomorrow, I understand, there will be a caucus now and then in this state, and a great deal of importance. And it can have a tremendous impact if we can do well there and get national attention. And this can be a real boost to us. So if you're not involved, find out how you can get involved, and let's really have a great showing tomorrow, because this could be very, very important. It's still relatively early in this campaign season, and a lot more has happened than I ever thought it would happen a year ago. And so many people have joined, and they're so enthusiastic. And although we might not always be exactly satisfied with our national coverage or the time we get on the debates, but there are other sources of information.
Yeah.
There is a secret weapon. It's not so secret anymore, but it's a political equalizer called the internet. I do want to thank you for coming on, and for your enthusiasm, and regardless of what happens in the next day or two or a month or two, I am convinced that what we're doing now and what you have done and contributed to, it's really only the beginning.
Right.
Go forward and restore the freedoms of this country. Thank you very much.
President once said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Now it seems like we're supposed to be afraid. It's patriotic, in fact, and color-coded. And what we're supposed to be afraid of? Why, of being afraid. That's what terror means, doesn't it? That's what it used to mean.